Alright guys, everybody has been obsessed with what is coming next for GTA 6. Is it going to be trailer 3? Is it that Netflix preview everyone's been talking about? Is it a release date update? And in all that noise, almost nobody is talking about the thing that's actually going to be the biggest deal of all, which will be the launch date itself. Now, I don't think people have fully wrapped their heads around what that's actually going to look like. We're talking about the biggest video game release of all time, and honestly, biggest video game release might not even be the right category. This could end up being the biggest entertainment release of all time, full stop. So let's just go ahead and put some numbers on that claim because the history here is wild. So GTA 4 sold over 3 million copies on day one. GTA 5 nearly quadrupled that, so that would be I don't know, like around 12 million, or it was I believe it was moving around like 11 million in one day. But pretty much that's the trajectory we're working with, each entry roughly tripling or quadrupling the last one's opening. If that pattern holds even loosely, we're not just talking about breaking 20 million on day one, we're talking about blowing past it. So, my gut says somewhere in the low to mid 20 millions. And if it lands anywhere close to that, it doesn't just break the old record, it pretty much makes the old record look quaint. Now, then there's obviously lifetime sales as well. GTA 4 sits around 25 million copies, and GTA 5 it sits over 230 million copies sold. A number of Take-Two's own leadership has confirmed on investors' calls, and 230 million copies of one game. That figure is so far outside the normal range for any release. You know, that trying to use it as a baseline to predict GTA 6's ceiling barely makes sense anymore. And there's genuinely no comparable data to point to work from pretty much. We are in pretty much uncharted territory. Now let's talk money because the budget conversation has become almost as big as the story of the game itself. The rumored production budget is sitting north of $2 billion at, this point. And once you fold in marketing spend, you're realistically looking at something closer to $3 billion instead. And, for one video game, obviously. So, and here is the interesting twist. A chunk of that marketing might effectively be getting paid for. Rockstar reportedly struck a deal to premiere the deep dive gameplay reveal as a streaming event on Netflix before it rolls out anywhere else. Apparently exclusive for the first several hours before hitting other platforms like YouTube, for example. And, Netflix is functionally paying to be the first stop for what is, and at the end of the day, a marketing event. A marketing event being treated like prestige television. That's not really, happened with a video game before, and it might also be a smart way to spread audience traffic out instead of dumping everyone onto YouTube or Twitter at the same moment. But, the pre-orders numbers, back up just how much confidence there is in this launch. Take-Two's own CEO has said that customers are choosing the roughly $100 premium edition over the standard $80 edition at something like an 89% rate. So 90% of people are buying the $100 Ultimate Edition rather than the $80 standard edition. So just even thinking about that is insane. Now, the overwhelming of majority of people pre-ordering are skipping the cheaper option entirely. Nobody's really price shopping this launch. People just want in whatever it costs, and that's because before we've seen a single second of actual gameplay footage. you know Here is where it actually gets concerning though, not for Rockstar, but for like the internet as a whole, because massive game launches don't just strain storefronts, they actually strain like real internet infrastructure as well. And obviously there's precedent for this. For example, when Call of Duty Black Ops 6 launched, regional internet services in part of Alaska reportedly buckled because local infrastructure couldn't handle the download traffic. Now, and that's obviously Call of Duty, which is a huge release, of course, but it's nowhere compared to like what GTA 6 will be. And obviously, even much smaller releases have knocked storefronts offline as well. Xbox, including hiccups on Steam and Xbox. Now, obviously, scaled out to what what's likely to be the single largest simultaneous digital download event in history. You know, it's not like analysts aren't even entirely joking when they say internet itself might have a rough day. But now let's go ahead and talk about the price because this is where it does get a little uncomfortable because Rockstar can charge $80 for the standard edition and $100 for the version with extra in-game currency, and people will simply pay for it. But that obviously doesn't mean the rest of the industry gets to follow suit, and we've already seen that tested and rejected. When Xbox tried pricing The Outer Worlds 2 and Avowed at $80. Consumers obviously pushed back hard before either game even released. Nintendo got away with an $80, on the Mario Kart world, but obviously that's Mario Kart, an all-time top tier franchise. And even then they haven't repeated that price across their lineup since. But the lesson is that only a small handful of franchise on the planet have enough built up goodwill to charge premium prices and still sell in the tens of millions. GTA is one of, maybe 3 or 4 series on Earth that could actually pull that off. Everyone else is trying to just, copy the pricing model. Everyone who's trying to copy that pricing model is just going to get burned pretty much. But the same logic obviously applies to the lack of meaningful physical release. Yes, people will absolutely still buy GTA 6 even without much of a disc option. But nobody buying it digitally should feel bad about, nobody should buying it digitally should feel bad about that. Obviously, it doesn't prove what some people wanted to prove, that this is a once in a generational title. And yeah, publishers may even point at GTA 6's digital first success as evidence that nobody wants physical media anymore. But that's obviously cherry picking, the one franchise on the planet that could actually go ahead and pull that off. But yeah, and it's also worth mentioning, or also worth noting how much the rest of the industry's release calendar is bending around this game. Almost nothing major is scheduled anywhere close to GTA 6's launch window. Publishers are actively steering clear. About the only release brave enough to sit nearby is the Ocarina of Time remake, and honestly, that's like, that's probably fine since Nintendo's audience tends to buy Nintendo games regardless of what else is out that month. But here's what I do find the most interesting, more than the sales figure or budget. This might be one of the last true shared cultural moments. And or last true shared cultural moments entertainment has less. Think about how rare it is becoming for something to genuinely stop the world for a single day. Obviously, sports still manage it, the Super Bowl, the World Cup, the Olympics, but everyone tunes it together at the same time every 4 years or every February, whatever. But outside of sports, it barely happens anymore because everything is on demand now. Nobody watches the same thing Nobody's watching the same thing as like the same moment the way people used to. The last time gaming really had a moment like this was arguably back in 2022 for Elden Ring, and even that was like a fraction of the scale we're talking about here. So, there's also the online component to think about. Whatever the next version of GTA Online looks like, the current one has reportedly generated enormous ongoing revenue for years after release. We're talking serious money every single day long after launch, and we haven't even gotten a hint yet of what that side of the game looks like this time around. But I do think that is kind of special, you know. But anyways, like, is the industry actually ready for this? Probably not, if we're being honest. Not the storefronts, not the internet providers, and maybe not even Rockstar's own servers if the next GTA Online launches anywhere close to day one. But that should be it for the video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments and whether you're going premium edition like the 89% or holding out for standard. Either way, thank you for nerding out about this with me. If you're not subscribed yet, now's a good time. More GTA 6 launch breakdowns are coming as we get closer to launch.